Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto masters 8 inner and bijuu mode in the chunin exam. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by Sage of the Untold Prophecy and link in the description and support writer. Let's start the video. It was a common day in the great village of Kunai. People were bustling about, chatting to friends, or even having a simple drink at the bar, but like most things it all goes away when night embraces all. Now we zoom in on a supposedly empty training field while finding what appears to be a boy no older than 5 or 6 years of age. Now while it is uncommon to see a child out at night, you must understand that this is no normal child. If there ever was a concept of being normal existed, he is the son of the Yondaime Hokage, Minato Namikaze the Kiroi Senko, and Konoha's Akashai, Kushina Uzumaki, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. But that is what almost everyone except the current Hokage don't know, but what they do know is that he is the container of one of the most powerful beings in existence, the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Of course though, he already knows all that the mask he puts on for everyone, even the Sandaime who is the one in charge after Naruto's father died sealing the Kyuubi into him. In reality he is probably the smartest person next to Nara. Anyway, back to the training field, we see Naruto meditating and being as calm and relaxed as possible. If one were to look with the eyes of a Hyuga they would see an unusual anomaly, that being, despite his enormous reserves, his chakra is moving in perfect calmness until you get to what is commonly referred to the first gate of the Hachiman or 8 celestial gates. Now what you would see there is that it's if that the gate appears to slowly open, although you would have been hard-pressed to notice. You see what he is trying to do is permanently open the gate. You may be wondering if that is even possible. Well, anything is possible when you have 3 things in this world. Those things are determination, patience, and most admittedly chakra. Now if you are new to the concept of chakra, it is at first very simple to understand. Chakra, as far as everyone else is concerned, is the combination of the physical energy in every cell of the human body and the experience you gain from missions or everyday lives. But in truth it is more complicated than that, granted not by much but still, it is the combination of Kai. Although this is what was explained previously is quite accurate but not correct, it is the very source of physical capabilities which gives the cells in the human body energy. The second half is called Ryatsu, which is the power granted to your soul and is capable of having the same effect as killing intent, though it is only accessible through the combination of Kai in the living body. Well, these are the 2 energies used to combine and make chakra, they are nothing more than that in this tale. Now back to Naruto, the reason he is doing this is in fact very simple. He wants to see if it's possible. After all, he heard how one person in a green spandex suit actually opens them by forcefully opening them. Now think about if they are opened forcefully and cause harm to the body, then what would happen if you were open it slowly and allowing your body to get used to the chakra output as well as preventing harm to the body. So here he is trying to do what most thought to impossible, and after a whole year of meditating he does it. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, the pariah of Konoha, the Sandaime Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, the prankster from hell, has permanently opened the first gate of the Hachiman. But why stop there when there are 7 more? 8 years later. We find Naruto waking up in his run-down apartment at 6 AM sharp. Over the years he had grown in height that most his age and older would be hard-pressed to believe is real. He stands at an impressive 5'10" with his hair going down to his mid-back in a ponytail, along with 6-pack abs that even steel would feel soft in comparison, arms and legs that could crush boulders with a simple flex, but remain tight and compressed to look more slim and sleek, eyes that could and would put the ocean and sky to shame, and lastly pectorals that looked as if it was stone. All in all he would put a sculpture made by 10 of the best artists and stone workers to shame. Over the 8 years Naruto had covertly bought weights with seals in order to increase the weight so as to avoid having to buy heavier weights. He had studied taijutsu styles far and wide. With his unique eidetic memory, he was able to memorize them all and created his own style, the Senkabushi, mainly for the fact he has effectively combined all the styles he read into one. As for ninjutsu, he had been able to surprisingly learn a decent amount of Iram-gijutsu in order to heal anything from minor to average levels of injury and nothing more. But sadly his only skills in genjutsu was the ability to detect and dispel them and the henge. He had also found a unique skill that went back to the Shodaime's time, senjutsu. So far he had managed to make one jutsu with the sage arts, and that was the Dorigen Ken, a jutsu that would miraculously manifest a giant silver Japanese dragon nearly twice the size of a certain snake boss and continue to obliterate all in its path. Sadly that form of the jutsu is only accessible through senjutsu, but it does have a small-scale version that would, if it hit, close off nearly 20 to 30 tenketsu at once, a move that most Hyuga would do anything to get their hands on. Finally though, he had also managed to unlock all the Hachiman permanently. But due to the sheer power he would be releasing would obviously attract unwanted attention, so to burn that bridge he had trained to suppress his massive amount of chakra to that of civilian levels, although a Hyuga would be able to notice the difference given 10 or so seconds. As Naruto prepares to get ready to go to the academy, a voice suddenly speaks to him. You know, once you reveal your capabilities that Uchiha prick is going to demand you give him your power, right, said the voice in his head. Yeah, Kurama, I know that that's going to happen, but hey, imagine the look on his face when I say no. Thinks Naruto to the infamous nine-tailed fox now known as Kurama. Yeah, I know, I was just wondering if you were really serious about doing it this time. Says the fox. Oh, I'm serious this time. I mean, failing the other 2 genin exams was just an excuse, find out what Mizuki was up to, and now that I know, well, he thinks leaving the rest for Kurama to chew over for thought. Anyway, besides that, it's about time that Konoha finally see what's under the mask of the village idiot. Thinks Naruto with conviction. And with that he steps out of his apartment without the illusion he had placed on himself to look the part of a class clown. He was wearing what appeared to be a haori that had the kanji for 1000 on his right shoulder and the kanji for will on the left and the kanji for determination, patience, and chakra on the back, all in a silver color. The haori itself was a midnight blue in color with black trimming with a torn look at the bottom, with the arms covering the weights on his arms. Under that light, a blackish blue muscle shirt and black cargo pants covering his leg weights that went into a black steel-toed boot. His hands and arms themselves were covered in white bandages with fingerless gloves with a steel plate across the knuckles. Alright kid, just try not to kill anyone at the academy, just a good maiming will be fine. Says Kurama with a smirk. Yeah, now just be quiet and enjoy the show, you lazy fox. Kami knows I will respond, our favorite blonde. Heh, give 'em hell kid, give 'em hell. Was Kurama's last comment for the moment. Oh, I will, believe me, I will, thought the blonde before heading out to do as his first and best friend suggested. Chapter 2. Prodigy. Shikamaru Nara here, Sasuke Chiha Ake, next Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto Uzumaki. Sayoke now tha, says Iruka, the teacher of Naruto's class, when he is interrupted by a knock on the door. Huh? Was his smart reply. Who's there? He says after a second. After that was said, the door slides open to reveal a person who was 5'10" with long blonde hair and a ponytail that reached the middle of his back and a midnight blue haori that concealed what lay beneath. They also noticed the kanji on the haori, well, mostly wondering why someone would have 1000 on it. Hey. Who the hell do you think you are barging into our class? Says a boy with a small white dog on his head. Well, Kiba, I'll have you know that I belong in this class, seeing as how I'm here to take the genin exam, answered our stranger. What do you mean you're here to take the exam? Just who are you? Continues Kiba. Sai, what I mean, Kiba, is that I, Naruto Uzumaki, am here to, simply put, take the exam. Responds our currently enigmatic blonde, whose response gets quite the uproar from the class. What? Shouts practically the whole class at the announcement. As if you could be the dope. Says Sasuke with assurance. And what makes you think I'm not? Questions Naruto. The simple fact that you are taller than anyone our age, the fact that you have longer hair than him, and the fact that you are not wearing that orange jumpsuit. Finished the Uchiha with slight arrogance. What he wasn't expecting was for the faker to start his own explanation. Well, you would be right if that was the real me. States Naruto, causing Sasuke's smirk to slip off. Now for fact number 1, I am this tall mainly for the fact I had eaten a pretty healthy diet in my genes. For fact number 2 and 3 is rather simple, genjutsu, I would never something that bright and orange as a ninja. Finishes the blue-eyed teenager. Hi. Says about some odd 11 students trying to see if this is a genjutsu, fortunately, or unfortunately depending how you look at it, it didn't work. Really now, you would think I would place myself under a genjutsu just to look like this during the exam? Asks the untransformed boy, further shocking the class with the maturity they heard from him and sending them further into a raise. Alright. Exclaims Iruka after finally having enough of being ignored. Now if you'll please take your seat, Naruto, we'll gladly begin the test. Says the teacher, earning groans from the lazy and a chorus of finally from the hyper students, but not an ounce of complaining or excitement came from Naruto, which surprised him greatly. Yes, he believes that this is Naruto mainly due to the fact he checked himself to make sure he wasn't being pranked. After Naruto took his seat at the back corner near the window they'd begun. The first part of the test was the written portion. Now Naruto may not be a Nara, but he is most certainly the closest person to it, so it only took him 10 out 45 minutes to take the test. And right when he put the pencil down and walked Mizuki. Sorry I'm late, Iruka, I got sidetracked by that demon cat Tor clawing at my face. He say, gaining confused looks from the students and a shiver from Iruka, who looked sympathetic after hearing the reason. It's alright, we just started anyway, so just kick back and relax for now. Says Iruka. As the rest of the time for the test is used up, Mizuki and Iruka gather the test and leaves the M with the test graders. After that, hey, all head outside to begin the second part of the exam, taijutsu. Alright class, this part of the exam you will face each other in a one-on-one match that will stop when one of you are unable to continue, okay? He says, earning a chorus of hi. In response. Eventually they get the clan heirs. First up was Kiba Inuzuka and Shino Abram, a boy who wears a high-collar trench coat and round sunglasses. The winner of that match ended up in Kiba's favor due to relying more on taijutsu than Shino, who relies on his bugs. Next was Shikamaru Nara and Choji Akimichi, which due to being best friends, refused to fight each other. After them was Ino Yamanaka and Hinata Hyuga, which the winner of that match was surprisingly Hinata, who showed a calm face the whole way through. Then just Naruto and Sasuke were the last two to go. Naruto Uzumaki and Sasuke Uchiha enter the ring and when I say so, fight. Says Mizuki with a small dark grin forming, oh yes, he now knows that the unusually tall blonde was Naruto after being told so by Iruka. Alright dope, let's get this over with. Says Sasuke with the usual arrogance back in place. Yes, let's get this done, Uchiha, says Naruto, unperturbed by Sasuke's arrogance. Iruka looked at both students before giving a brief shout of Hajime. And with that they started. Naruto had merely stayed where he was while Sasuke first got into a stance before launching forward with a skillfully thrown strike to Naruto's head. But to Naruto it was as if Sasuke was moving in slow motion, so he simply ducked under the strike and delivered a stunning palm strike to Sasuke's solar plexus, knocking the wind out of him. As he took a step back to let Sasuke get his breath, he observed the situation with cold calculating eyes. As Sasuke gained his second wind, he glared at Naruto with an unreadable expression. So the dope is better than I thought, maybe I should be careful here. Thought the Avenger. And with that he carefully struck again, but all Naruto did was tilt his head back, dodging the strike, then driving his head forward into Sasuke's own. The blow left Sasuke stunned as he tried to rid himself of the pain, while Naruto calmly stood still. So far everyone was stunned that the dope isn't just standing up to Sasuke, but is winning. The concept was so foreign to them they couldn't think straight for a moment. After letting Sasuke get back up, he decided to finish it, and like a blur he moved. All you could see was a streak of midnight blue and then thud. It was over. Naruto stood vicious over the prone form of Sasuke. After waiting a few moments for him to come to, Naruto had his hand out for him to grab. That was a good fight, Sasuke, but maybe you shouldn't let your arrogance cloud your judgment on what to do in a fight, okay? He says, still having his hand out. A moment later Sasuke took it, being lifted to his feet and giving a nod to Naruto before walking back to the other students with Naruto in tow. Iruka was impressed with Naruto with the level of maturity Naruto showed, while Mizuki was gritting his teeth together at not being able to fail the demon brat. Okay class, now to the targets to practice your throwing accuracy. Stated Iruka, leading them to said targets. Eventually they got through everyone until as usual the clan heads. Kiba got 7 out of 10 on the kunai, while getting a 6 out of 10 on the shuriken. Shino got the same thing for kunai, but got 8 out of 10 for shuriken. Shikamaru got a 5 out of 10 for both kunai and shuriken, but you could easily see he wasn't trying. Choji, while actually trying, sadly didn't do much better as he got a 6 out of 10 for both. Ino actually impressed both teachers by getting 8 out of 10 for kunai and 7 out of 10 for shuriken. Hinata surprised them all again by getting 9 out of 10 for both, and as usual, again, Sasuke and Naruto were all that was left. Sasuke Uchiha, please come up and proceed to throw the provided kunai and shuriken. States Mizuki. All he got was a short derisive HN as a response. When he stepped up to the stand he drew a calm breath and then he surprised himself by following the dope's advice while managing to get 9 out of 10 for kunai and 10 out of 10 for shuriken. Impressive Sasuke-san, very well done. Says none other than the brown-nosed Mizuki. With that he walks towards the other students, not even bothering to make a comment to the dope. Naruto Uzumaki, get up here now or you will fail this exam. Says Mizuki, doing a complete 180 in his mood. As Naruto steps up to the stand and prepares to throw the kunai, he notices it was heavier than most, but with a quick flick of the wrist, the kunai not only hit the bull's eye, but shot right through the target as well, leaving a trail of splinters in its wake. Feeling like someone was staring, he turned to look at the teachers in class to see they were starting to pick up their jaws from the floor. Raising an eyebrow he asks what was on his mind. What? The fact he said it so casually was what caused most to face fault. Turning around he proceeded to do the same with the other kunai, managing to still get a bull's eye for each one, earning him a perfect 10 out of 10, further dumbfounding everyone. Then as he reached for the shuriken he noticed they weren't just overweighted but also unbalanced. But like last time he proved that no matter the type or make of a thrown weapon, he can get the same results. Incredible Naruto, a perfect score. Exclaims an excited Iruka. Maybe he will pass this time. He thinks with hope. Yes, very impressive Naruto. Says Mizuki with a scowl. Damn, now I'll have to try and fail him on the ninjutsu part, he thinks while suddenly growing a smirk. Alright class, follow us back inside for the ninjutsu part of the exam, says Iruka, snapping most people out of their stupor. Now as everyone waits in line to do the ninjutsu part of the exam, we find Sasuke and Naruto all the way in the back waiting patiently. Suddenly Sasuke turns and proceeds to ask, "How did you do that, dope?" Raising a single eyebrow he counters with, "Do what, Sasuke?" "You know what I mean, how did you beat me in a spar and on the throwing test?" asks Sasuke more specifically. Feigning a look of realization, Naruto proceeds to say, "Oh that, well, I trained." The way he said in such a casual way made Sasuke almost want to face fault. "You trained?" he asks as if he couldn't believe it. "Yep," the blonde responds. "But how did you try?" he began to say, but was interrupted when it was his turn for the ninjutsu exam. As Naruto waited for his turn, he was having a small conversation with Kurama. "So kid, how is the test going?" asks the demon. "So you decide to finally wake up, huh? Well, I sure surprised a lot of people today. I was even able to knock Sasuke down a few pegs. You want to know best part? He took my advice, which I thought he would have thrown out a window if he could," thinks the host. Maybe he can be a redeemable Uchiha unlike the rest of that family that tried to take control of me," comments the bijuu. "You know you got to let go of that hatred sometime, right?" questions the blonde. "At the moment I lose my hatred is the moment those traitorous Uchihas are dead," coldly replies the fox. "So I will just have to work on it, I guess. Anyway, it looks like it's my turn." And with that, Naruto enters the exam room. "Alright Naruto, first you're going to do the henge," says Iruka. One moment later, Naruto performs a perfect henge of the Yondaime Hokage. "Very good, alright, the next one is Kawarimi," he states. One moment later, Iruka feels a distinct pull and poof, he was standing where Naruto was. "Very impressive, Naruto, able to switch yourself with another person is not an easy thing to accomplish, well done." "Next and last is the bunshin," says a worried Iruka. "Iruka-sensei, can I do a variant of the bunshin instead?" asks Naruto. Sure, but may I ask why?" questions Iruka. "That's very simple, Iruka-sensei, it's because no matter how much I tried I could never perform the normal bunshin due to my large reserves of chakra, but a variant would be much easier," answers Naruto with a surprisingly calm tone. "Alright, you can perform the variant anytime you're ready," says Iruka. "Maybe, just maybe," exclaims Iruka in his head. "Okay, here goes nothing." As he takes a deep breath, he feels Mizuki send a subtle chakra pulse trying to disrupt his control, but instead he keep a focused mind and exclaims the jutsu's name. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Chapter 3. Bones. As Naruto walks out of the testing room for ninjutsu, one would notice the big grin forming on his face. If one were to look up from his smile, you would notice the headband with a metal plate having a likeness of a leaf adorning it. And as the rest of the class noticed this, they couldn't help but gawk at him for passing. In their heads it finally registered that this is definitely not the same blonde they knew of. As if finally noticing their stares, he raises an eyebrow, tilted his head slightly, and asked what. This caused most of the students to face fault and causing one Shikamaru Nara to mutter his usual troublesome. Shrugging it off as them realizing he isn't who they thought, he continues down to his seat by the window. On his way to his seat, he couldn't help but feel like someone, or some people, were looking at him. As he turned to look at who it was, he sees none other than Sasuke looking at him with a look of confusion on his face. "Yes, Sasuke?" questions the blonde. "How did you pass, dope? Even with your new skills you would have failed the Bunshin no Jutsu?" asks the obsidian-haired preteen. "Well, that's very simple, Sasuke," starts the blonde, earning another confused look from the Uchiha. "I gained permission to use a different clone jutsu and passed that way." He finishes, getting the Avenger an idea to form in his head. Just as he was about to ask for him to teach him this different clone jutsu, Iruka walks in order to make his speech with a seething Mizuki close behind. "Alright everyone, sit down," calmly says Iruka, although if anyone were skilled enough you would notice the slight air of pride he carried with him. After everyone took their seats as told, he began. "Okay, as all of you know, you passed the exams to become a ninja, now with that comes certain responsibilities," and as he gets into lecture mode and continues his speech, Naruto starts talking to everyone's favorite fox. "Hey Kurama, you awake yet?" thinks the blonde. "Yeah kid, I'm awake. What do you want?" asks the force of nature. "What? I can't just talk to you every now and then without asking for something," says the prodigy with mock hurt. "Yes you can, but as of right now I get the feeling you want something. Am I right or wrong?" honestly answers the not-so-demonic demon. Mentally sighing at his oldest friend's answer, he decides to get to the point. "Well, I was just wondering when you would give me that bloodline that you think would enhance my taijutsu," thinks the blonde. At this, Kurama couldn't help the smirk that formed over his face. "Well, since you finally decided to pass this horrid excuse of an exam, I was thinking I would give you your bloodline today after you leave the academy," states the fox, causing Naruto to form a small smirk in the real world, almost causing Iruka to pause in his speech lecture. For whatever reason Naruto is smiling. I hope it's not for a prank on me. Worriedly thinks the scared chunin. Then boring minutes later. Everyone began to file out of the classroom to get picked up by their parents, except select few, and to show off their accomplishment. But as soon as Naruto walked out the parents were confused as to who he was. But then one of them recognized the whisker marks, and they soon started to have not so subtle conversations with each other. "How did that thing pass?" says one. "That monster should just drop dead," states another. "Why does he look so different?" And so on and so forth. The not so subtle whispers continued, not even noticing the subject of said whispers was gone. As soon as he heard the parents start talking, he decided that it was best to leave before things got a little violent. Not because he would start attacking or anything, but because the villagers would try to discipline him. When he got home he decided it was best to get into his mindscape as quick as possible. He then gets into a meditating position on his bed and quickly enters his mindscape, causing his body to go limp and fall on the bed as if he was asleep. Mindscape. Naruto soon finds himself in a lush forest filled with trees that would even tower of Kurama. Speaking of which, we find said fox calmly walking through the thick foliage, casting a huge shadow over our hero. On the fox's neck you could plainly see a collar with the kanji for seal on it. "Well kid, you ready to receive your gift?" jokingly asks the fox with a smirk on his visage. "You know it, Kurama," exclaims the blonde. No matter how hard he tried, the only way he wouldn't be so loud was when he was training or in a fight. "Well kid, before I give you this bloodline let me tell about it first, okay?" he says, then continues with waiting for a reply. "This bloodline I'm about to give you is called the Dead Bone Pulse bloodline. It is pretty much one of the most powerful bloodlines out there in the world. It allows one to manipulate their skeletons to the point of even making a whole forest of bones like the Shodaime Hokage's Mokuton, with the exception of it being, well, bone. Another ability is to increase one's bone density depending on how much chakra is used. Most of the original owners of this bloodline, the Hokage, only enhanced it to the point it is just slightly harder than steel, and with that you can make a sort of armor out of it. You could even make weapons out of your skeleton. Most commonly used would be swords. So as far as I know this is probably one of the most versatile bloodlines in creation." And with that the fox looks at its host for any questions, and he didn't have to wait long. "If this bloodline was so powerful then how come I haven't heard of it before? And if there was a clan of them then what happened to them?" asked the confused teen. "Well, to kill two birds with one stone, that is because they were wiped out a long time ago and simply forgotten," casually replies the demon. "Well, isn't it a bit harsh to just forget them? I mean, they were one of the most powerful clans that I've just heard of, how can they just forget about them?" questions the blonde. "The simple reason really," he says, causing his host to look at him funny. "Fear." "Fear?" repeats the Jinchuriki. "Yes. Fear, such a simple concept, but a complex reality. It overrides all sense of reasoning, causing panic and, eventually, chaos. You see, the Kagaya clan was not the most peaceful of people. They lived to fight and fight they did. They caused nothing but bloodshed as they crossed the lands, and they enjoyed nothing else as much as fighting. Eventually, they thought it would be a good idea to fight a bijuu host. My host, to be exact." "What happened?" asks the current host. "Well, they fought, of course. It was barely even considered that. You see, this host was one of your ancestors, Mito Uzumaki. Well, at first she tried to find a peaceful way to settle, the Kagayas on the other hand only wanted to fight. It eventually escalated to the point where words wouldn't do anything, and soon they fought. It took my host using all 9 taels worth of my power for her to stop the fight, one. But as she was not used to using my full power at the time, she lost herself to the rage that came with it. After she woke up all she saw were dead bodies that could hardly be recognized as human. It was at that point that when I would offer my help in a fight, she would refuse, saying she would not lose herself again," finishes the bijuu. "Wow," was the only thing that could be heard after the tale of the Kagaya's end. "Yes, it was quite impressive that it all of my power in order to kill them," says the grinning fox, "but enough of that. Are you ready to receive this bloodline?" At that the blonde nodded his head, and that was all the incentive he needed to begin. "Oh. Just so you know, this will hurt. A lot." And then it started. At first it seemed as just a warm feeling in his gut. That was when it moved into his whole body and increased in heat and continued to do so until it felt like he was being torn apart at the molecular level, which is exactly what's happening. It lasted a good 5 hours in the real world, but in his mindscape, it only lasted a couple of seconds due to the fox manipulating the feel of time and said. Mindscape. Naruto woke up with a cold sweat all over his body. But as he kept calming himself and slowing his rapidly beating heart, he then noticed it was dark out and he could see the moon shining in its full pale luminescence. It was at that point that decided to go to his usual empty training ground. Briefly sealing his weights away, he was able to blur his way there at speeds that caused a silver-haired man to lose his book to the wind, earning a shout of "my precious." From him, making a red-eyed and raven-haired woman stumble back and fall on her rear, blinking rapidly, putting out a bearded chain smoker's lighter before he could light his cigarette, and made a green spandex-clad man to spin into green whirlwind, nearly causing him to fall down afterwards. The only ones noticing any sign of a moving body was silver-haired man and the green spandex-wearing man, but even then they could only see a midnight blue color. This wasn't the first time this happened, and the two who noticed have been trying to catch this person for years now with no success. As he neared his training grounds, he heard the sounds of fighting coming from the small hut area where he slept one time because of overexerting himself. As he came within the area of the fight, he was surprised to see Iruka there fighting Mizuki. When caught sight of the large scroll on Mizuki's back, he grinned, thinking, "Well, Mizuki team, it seems you finally scrounged up enough courage to steal the Hokage's sacred sealing scroll." But instead of intervening right away, he decided to wait until he was needed. "Why? Why would you betray the village? Why betray your wife?" shouts a heavily wounded Iruka. "Ha. That's very simple, Iruka, it's because I want power. This village is holding me back. As for my wife, when she caught wind of my plans, I had no choice but to kill her. If only she could have just come with me, she wouldn't be dead. But with this scroll I will be unstoppable. So I don't need her anymore, as I will just be able to get anyone I want with the power I'm about to get. Ha ha ha," shouts back the psychotic rogue ninja. At this, Iruka grew a shocked look and thus didn't notice the large shuriken coming at him until it was too late. He closed his eyes and braced himself for the cold and dark embrace of death, but it never came. He cracked open one eye only to open them both in shock, because what was in front of him was none other than Naruto Uzumaki. But when he looked at the shuriken, he was surprised further by seeing it was caught in between Naruto's thumb and his pointing and middle finger. "What? How did you do that, you demon?" questioningly shouts the slightly scared rogue. "Oh, this," he says, gesturing with a hand holding the oversized shuriken. "It is very simple really, I caught it," he says, causing Iruka to sweat drop at the explanation. "Oh well, I'll get you this time, demon. Die," the traitor states, then shouts. But forgetting the blonde still had the other shuriken, it was quickly deflected with the other being thrown at him. As he ducked, he didn't see Naruto appear behind him at unnatural speed. The reason for it being unnatural was that it didn't use an ounce of chakra to enhance his movement. It was just pure and natural speed. Taking notice of a lack of target, Mizuki quickly spun around only to meet a bone-shattering punch to his face. "Come on, Mizuki team. I didn't even put my all into that punch," complains the blonde. All he got was a gurgle from the currently downed rogue from choking a little on his own blood from his broken nose before spitting it out. "What was that, Mizuki team?" asks the blonde. "I said, just die," shouts the enraged chunin. As he lashed out with a straight jab to the source of his anger. All Naruto did was twist his body out of the way and lightly kick the traitor in the face. As Mizuki stumbled back holding his pulverized nose and broken jaw. Then he pulled something out from his vest and drank it quickly. His body started to convulse and expand, he gained the appearance of a humanoid tiger that was only a head taller than him. As the sound of the bones of his jaw cracking back into place and his nose repairing itself, you could see the killer intent in his eyes. All Naruto did was get into a loose but practiced stance, shrugging off the killer intent like it was nothing, which it was when compared to the first time he met the fox. When a single leaf landed in front of them, they sprung into action. As Mizuki swung his fist in a wild swatting motion, Naruto jumped and landed on the appendage, squatting down and twisting his body into a devastating kick to his head. "Will you stop hitting my head?" shouts the now tiger-like man. "Okay," responded cheerful Naruto after jumping off of his arm. After he said that though, he blurred to Mizuki's side and made a quick strike on his shoulder and shattered it in the process. The next moment Mizuki screamed in both rage and pain, making a rear thrusting kick towards his opponent. When he hit nothing but air, he turned to look, only to find nothing there. "Huh?" was the smart question flowing from his mouth. But after a second of confusion, he felt his other shoulder become nothing more than a bloody stump. He screamed in excruciating pain at the loss of a limb, but managed to see Naruto have his hand down holding what looked like a sword made of bone. But he didn't stop there, because the next thing Mizuki knew was that he was flying through the air until he collided with the trunk of a tree, splintering the wood and ricocheting towards the middle of an open field. He managed to stumble back into a standing position, but could only stand there and watch as the demon walked through the foliage, still holding the sword before it disintegrated into dust. "Well, Mizuki team, it seems that we have reached the end of our little fight, so I'll give you one chance to give up and come quietly. If not, you just end up being a broken man, both in body and in spirit, by realizing how outclassed you were from the beginning," proposes the blonde. "Ah, Huff, as if Huff you could Huff beat me. Huff, tell me Huff, do you know Huff why the village hates Huff you so much?" questions the traitor, regaining his breath. Acting as if he didn't know what he was talking about, he decided to play along. What? What are you talking about, Mizuki team? No. Mizuki, it's forbidden to say anything about it. Shouts Iruka after stumbling onto the empty field. At this, Mizuki couldn't help the dark grin that formed across his face. You know, Naruto, how the Yondaime killed the Kyuubi. But no, that is false. A bijuu can never be killed by mortal means, so the only way to stop its rampage was to seal it into something. A newborn child had the best possible chances of containing a demon due to their underdeveloped chakra coils being the most adaptive at the time of their birth. You, Naruto, were that child. You are the Kyuubi reborn. He stated, hoping to break the kid's spirit and will. At first he seemed to have succeeded when he noticed the blonde's head down and his shoulders shaking. But that died off when he heard not crying but laughing. And then Naruto threw his head up and practically bellowed with laughter. What? What is so damn funny? What's so funny is that you think I don't already know about old Fuzzbutt. Replies the blonde, earning surprised looks from everyone, including a certain old man observing the event with a crystal ball. Then Naruto gained a cold, emotionless look, appeared beside Mizuki, then whispered in his ear. And now that you broke the Sandaime's law, your punishment is death. He then launches Mizuki into the air via an uppercut to the chin. Then he grows two bone-like extrusions from each of his hands, almost like claws, and vanishes and reappears next to the airborne Mizuki, raining punch after skin-slicing punch on the tiger-like body of the traitor. With each punch thrown, you could hear the sound of bones shattering from the sheer force, yet the claws Naruto made didn't crack, and then with one spinning axe kick to the neck, with a bone spike coming from the heel, Mizuki's body shot towards the ground at near instantaneous speeds, forming a massive dust cloud. Once the dust cleared, both spectators could only gape at the size of the crater formed, for it was nearly 20 feet in diameter. Mizuki's body had reverted back to normal sometime before the dust cloud dissipated and now lay lifeless in the middle of the crater, full of holes that were made by his executioner's bone claws. The figure was seen at the edge of the crater, and when they could get a good look, they saw it was Naruto, without his claws, wiping some dust off his haori, acting as if nothing had happened. Noticing the look he was getting from his academy teacher, he tilted his head slightly with a raised eyebrow, saying, "What?" At that, Iruka and the Sandaime couldn't help but face fault at the casual tone in his former student's voice, and unless he was mistaken, amusement. After a moment of being absolutely awestruck at his pupil's performance, he decided to just say what was on his and the Sandaime's mind before he passed out. What the hell? Then nothing. One day later, Konoha Hospital. Iruka woke to the sight of white walls and the smell of disinfectant. After some amazing deduction skills on his part, he found out he was in the hospital. Slowly he propped himself on his bed, wincing in pain as everything hurt. It was at that point they noticed how many bandages were covering him. I guess Mizuki got me better than I thought. Was the thought that went through his head. At the sound of the door being opened, he turned his head to see who was coming, and it was none other than the reason he was alive to even be in the hospital in the first place. "Hey Iruka-sensei, how are you feeling?" asks the blonde with a worried tone. "Oh, I am doing well, Naruto, nothing like getting the snot beaten out of you to get you going right," says the scarred chunin in an attempt to lighten the mood of the blonde, earning a sigh of relief with a small chuckle. "Well, I guess team placements is going to have to be put on hold till I get out," says the chunin after a moment. Well, I guess that I'll see you later, Iruka-sensei." And with that, the blonde walks out of the hospital while ignoring the looks he got from the staff. 20 minutes later, Naruto's apartment. "So kid, how did change go?" asked the fox after waking up from his longer than usual nap. "It went pretty well, Kurama, I even got to test it out on that traitor Mizuki," thought the blonde. "Nani?" was the smart reply, "You tested it out on that team?" He had it coming for a long time. "So how did it feel to be able to use your bones as weapons?" "In a word, incredible. Although I don't have much training with it, I was able to make sword and claws with it. Plus, with a week before team placements, I need to get better at using this bloodline besides claws and swords," stated the bone user. "Well, if you want to get better at using the bloodline, why don't you use the Kage Bunshin Jutsu?" supplies the demon. "Well, I would if it weren't for one problem." "And what, pray tell, would that be?" "The reason why I can't use shadow clones is that they would dispel themselves trying to, with the bones piercing the skin, and thus would destroy the clone," explains the host. I never would have guessed you to be able to think things through without me. This is an improvement," he says with a smirk. "Gee, thanks for the calm, wait a moment," replies the now angry blonde. "Bukuku. Yet despite that you still can't take a joke," he says before going back to sleep to leave his host alone. Yeah, whatever," he grumbles before heading to his bed for the night. Chapter 4. Morals. It was 6 in the morning, and while most everyone in Konoha was sleeping, Naruto had just woken up. It had only been a day and a half since Mizuki attempted to steal the sacred scroll of sealing, and he guessed it would be today that the Hokage would ask for him. But before that would happen he went to the small kitchen area to cook himself a small breakfast that is surprisingly not ramen. After breakfast he went to the bathroom to take a shower, but while he was doing that there was a knocking at the door. 5 minutes later you could hear the door open with a click and then a Tora-masked male Anbu agent walk in. When they heard that the shower was going he were about to turn around and wait outside if it wasn't for the expired pie to suddenly slam into his face. Stumbling back he tripped over a thin wire that when he landed on the ground released a torrent of pink paint onto him. Slowly getting up the Anbu agent examined the area for any other kinds of traps. Finding none he took a step only to hear the sound of numerous things going off at once. The first was more expired pie being launched towards his spot. When he was dodging them with frantic ninja skills, he missed that there was a conveniently placed pitchfork and when he stepped on it, his face mask was introduced to wood and some pain. Stumbling back once more he stepped on the pitchfork's twin, causing it to hit the back of his unprotected head. Pain exploded in the back of his head as he stumbled forward, luckily not into the pitchfork. Fortunately the Anbu agent was spared more humiliation when the person he was sent looking for came out of the shower dressed in his usual garb. Expertly quelling his anger at the humiliating pranks he walked forward to his target. "You are to report to the Hokage immediately." And with that he flickered out of view by the most common of shinobi transport, the shunshin. Shrugging at the pink Anbu agent's vanishing act he decided it wouldn't do to be late before you even got to be shinobi. 20 minutes later. Knock, knock. Hiruzen Sarutobi jumped at the sudden sound of unexpected knocking since he thought he had a little more time to read his icha. Recollecting what he called dignity he answered with the usual, "It's open." And in came the person that he was currently wondering if he knew at all. Naruto Uzumaki. Or could that be Kagaya now? Since he did show the ability to control the bones in his body to the same extent. No, thought Hiruzen, neither Minato nor Kushina showed any capabilities of having the Kagaya bloodline. That rules out the possibility of him having it through natural means. So how did Naruto get it? Before he could contemplate this further he was distracted by the not-so-subtle cough from said subject of his thoughts. "Ah, Naruto-kun. It's so nice to see you after how long has it been? A month?" He questioned because he really didn't know how long it was since they last talked. Actually Hokage-sama, Hiruzen cringed a little at that, since when did Naruto show respect? It has been about 2 years since we last talked to each other. Now this didn't really upset Hiruzen, but the way Naruto said it did. It was as if he was talking to a trained and very deadly soldier. So when, where, and how on earth did he end up like this? "Ah well I do hope you visit more often, I miss the way you could live in this dull old room," he says with practiced ease. But when he sees Naruto grow a cold facade he knew he had said something. "I am sorry Hokage-sama, but I must respectfully decline. After all the times you lied straight to my face all these years, I would like to keep my distance as much as possible," he says causing Hiruzen to go wide-eyed at the statement. The one thought going through his head was sadly, which lie? But after a moment he was relieved to see the cold look fade from the academy graduate. "Regardless, is there any particular reason you called for me?" Came the inquisitive and more intelligent question than he was used to, for Naruto at least. "Ah yes, there is in fact. As for the reason as to why I called you here is to figure out how you possess the Kagaya bloodline." And as soon as he said this Naruto had gained the expressionless look on his face once more. "That is something that I think you would find hard to believe. But, if you must know then I got the Kagaya bloodline from my tenant," he says completely shocking the old man and nearly giving him a heart attack. "Why you mean to tell me the reason you got that bloodline is because of the Kyuubi? Do you have any idea how reckless it is to accept such an offer from that demon?" And the moment he finished his small rant he was met with a stern and nearly soul-piercing glare. He began to wonder why he was on the receiving end of this, that is, until Naruto spoke. "With all due respect Hokage-sama, I would request that you refrain from labeling my only friend as such. Because if I just so happen to hear you call him such, let's just say there will be problems. Understand?" And while his voice hadn't changed in the slightest Hiruzen couldn't help but be somewhat fearful of the underlying threat. All he could do at that point was give a nod in understanding. "Now if that is all Hokage-sama I will be leaving now." And as he began to walk out the door Hiruzen stopped him saying, "Naruto-kun, wait." Turning his head so Hiruzen could see one of his eyes telling him to get on with it. "You must know that I never meant to harm you from keeping the fact you were the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. I thought it was best to keep it a secret from everyone that didn't know, even you. I had hoped for you to grow up in an at least somewhat normal life." He hurriedly said so to keep the blonde's attention. Naruto on the other hand could only sigh at the explanation before closing the door and walking to Hiruzen's desk. "I understand your reasoning Hokage-sama for keeping the Kyuubi a secret, but it's not the fact you held something like that from me. It's the fact you lied to me about my own parents that severed the bond between you and me. Every time I asked you if you knew my parents or discovered them you would lie with a straight face telling me no. If it wasn't for the Kyuubi's help I would never know who my parents were. I will tell you this though, if there is any part of you that really wants to rebuild the bond we once had, then bring it to the forefront of your mind every time I am mentioned in terms you wouldn't want your own self, or those you care for, being seen as. After the somewhat heated reply the room was quiet with Hiruzen going wide-eyed at what he found out. He knows about his parents. But how? I had everything having to do with them erased from Konoha's database. So how could he have figured it out? Unless the Kyuubi told him. Fortunately, for Hiruzen's sake, they were interrupted with an energetic shout of, "I got you now, old man." And in came flying a short brown-haired, helmet-wearing boy who just so happened to wear a ridiculously long scarf. Said scarf led to the downfall of whatever it was he was doing as he tripped on one end, sending him into a heap of his own tangled limbs. At this Hiruzen let out a sigh of exasperation, and a mental one for releasing the tension between him and Naruto. All Naruto did was hold back a snort of amusement at watching this kid fail at what appeared to be him trying to take out the Hokage. As if, while he may not favor the man right now he still knows it will take a lot more than that to beat him. All the while the little boy was asking, a bit too loudly, who tripped him. When he heard the snort he turned his head in the direction he heard it and saw an amused-looking guy. At first he was a little intimidated, after all, the man was obviously taller than him, and despite the loose clothing he could see the amount of muscle he had that only came from years of exercise. But after he got over the intimidation factor he pointed an accusing finger at the man while shouting, "You tripped me." What he wasn't expecting was for the man to snort again and say, "Kid, you tripped over your scarf that, by the way, is way too long for you. Plus I am all the way over here, how on earth could I have tripped you?" Unfortunately for the boy he only got angry at being called a liar, even though it was unintentional. A moment later he got up in the guy's face and started shouting again, albeit quieter. "Are you calling me a liar? Because if you are I'll knock your block off," he said trying, and failing, to intimidate the man in front of him. Now this only got Naruto annoyed, and so, showing a fraction of his impressive strength, he easily lifted the boy above his head with one hand. The kid on the other hand was now profusely sweating up a storm. After all, it's not every day someone picks you up with one hand and continues until you above said person's head. "Listen kid, don't you go around pointing finger at just anyone you see for causing something that was your own fault," he said hoping to make a point. Only, instead of said point getting across, the boy only took it as a challenge and with a look of defiance said, "Oh yeah? What are you gonna do about it?" Now this only earned him a brief "are you kidding" look from Naruto before he raised his hand getting ready to bop him on the head. That is, until a ninja wearing a black bandana with a forehead protector that had Konoha's symbol etched onto it. The rest of his outfit consisted of mostly of a black shirt, pants, shoes, and round sunglasses. The man's own presence brought one of overconfidence. And when he saw that who he was looking for in the hands of someone he didn't recognize he instantly shouted a warning. "Unhand the Hokage's honorable grandson, you filth," he oh so calmly requested. And as soon as said this the kid gained a smug look. Now normally after someone finds out they're threatening someone of importance, they tend to take back what they said or cease what they were going to do. Naruto, fortunately or unfortunately depending on your view, is anything but normal. So it goes without saying that as soon as he saw the smug look, he decided to give what the brat deserved. And with a weak punch that not only cracked the helmet in two, but put a decent-sized bump on the honorable grandson's head. After that he dropped the kid onto his rear end with a ninja from before immediately checking for serious injury. "Well Hokage-sama, I believe that it's time I left." And with that he left. A moment later Hiruzen decided to deal with the problem that was present. Ibisu, at the mention of his name the ninja clad in all black shot to attention, "May I ask why Konohamaru had escaped your watchful eyes?" he said getting a scared look from the man. "Why you see Hokage-sama, I was distracted from watching over him and in that moment of distraction, he managed to get away leading me on a wild goose chase." Ibisu explains trying to lessen his punishment. "Oh, is that all? Well then I guess you better get going, after all you still have yet to catch him." And at this Ibisu whirled around to the spot he thought his charge was. Only to find an empty spot where he used to be. After a moment of stunned silence for Ibisu he grew worried once more hearing what Hiruzen said next. If I am not mistaken he could be trying to find Naruto if him running after him was any indication. And with a casual shrug he went back to work while hiding a smirk at the panicked look Ibisu displayed before he vanished in a blur of movement. But Naruto. No. Please. No. Come on. Please. And pray tell, why should I? Because I asked nicely. Now this only got a blank stare in reply before he stopped walking and said, "Kid you do realize that what you call nicely is actually demanding in reality right?" And the only thing he got as an answer was for the kid to scratch the back of his head with a sheepish expression on his face. "Besides," he said once more getting the kid's attention, "why do you want me to train you anyway? And then he looked as if he was actually thinking why he was asking in the first place. Well, it's because I want to get to the title of Hokage as quickly as possible. He said as if that was reason enough, only to receive another bop on the head. Aki, that is in no way or form a reason to want me to teach you anything. Plus there is no way you are going to be Hokage if you keep trying to rush it. And with that he began to walk again. Only to be stopped once more in the form of the kid he still didn't know the name of. Please. I will do anything you want me to just as long as you teach me something. Sighing internally he took a quick look at the boy's eyes and saw an intense form of determination. Alright Gaki, I'll give you one shot, but before that I am going to ask you a question. If you get it wrong, well, you won't learn a thing from me. He said, seeing the hope in the kid's demeanor increase but stayed quiet to hear the question. Why do you want to be Hokage so badly? And the question was genuine, after all, he had wanted to be Hokage when he wore his mask. And there was only a moment of confusion on the boy's face before it became somewhat depressed. Well, it's so people won't look at me and just say oh. He's the Hokage's grandson. Or something like honorable grandson like that ass-kisser Ibisu. I have a name besides that, you know. And while this may not have been what Naruto was expecting, he understood the feeling, after all the villagers had called him, and still did so, demon and freak. Granted it was for somewhat different reasons, the goal was the same. When he was wearing his mask he had wanted to be Hokage to earn the villagers' respect and stop the name calling. The same could be said for this boy. Alright, but first, do you mind telling me your name? He said, getting a confused look. Huh? What for? Well, it would be bad if I didn't even know the name of who I'm going to teach, don't you think? And the moment he stopped the bow was surprised before a megawatt grin grew on his face, once again, eerily reminding him of his mask. My name is Konohamaru Sarutobi, future Hokage. And earned a grin from the tall blonde man in front of him. Well Konohamaru, my name is Naruto Uzumaki. And with that he beckoned Konohamaru to follow him. And not even hesitating in the slightest he followed after. 2 hours later, random training ground. Konohamaru collapsed in exhaustion from the rigorous training he just underwent. He had done 10 laps around the entire training ground with weights, then proceeded to do the katas of a special taijutsu style that Naruto knows. Said taijutsu was ironically called the monkey fist, involving an incredible degree of flexibility and quick movement with each and every limb, while also requiring extreme balance just like a monkey. After that they had a brief spar which ended up with where we are now, and Konohamaru not even landing a single hit. Well, that was pretty good Konohamaru, especially since you were able to get the basics to that taijutsu style I showed you. Although you will need to be a bit more flexibility and balance, other than that you will be fine. So be sure to stretch every day to increase your flexibility and you should be good. For balance, try practicing on, well, a balance beam and from there just find the most narrow ledge you can find, while not being too narrow or too high up from the ground. Praised Naruto, getting a weak grin from the tired boy before said boy dozed off. I believe I will take him back to the Sarutobi estate. Said Ibisu, appearing right next to Konohamaru, looking in Naruto's direction. Naruto only gave an approving nod and started to walk off until he heard Ibisu speak once more. You know, I don't think I would have ever been able to wear him out, what with all that boundless energy he seems to possess. And that taijutsu style, where on earth did you find it? After the question was asked, Naruto let a small, amused chuckle escape his lips. Now wouldn't that be telling? After all, everyone has their secrets, as I'm sure you do. And not even waiting for a response, Naruto vanished in a blur of speed. The only thing that actually gave away the fact he was there at all was the displacement of dust and dirt from the ground. 1 week later. The day was the day of team placements and none could have been more excited. Well, there was Shikamaru, but he would just tell you it was troublesome to be excited, and Naruto, but that is because he was more focused on the conversation he was having with Kurama. Hey Kurama, I've been meaning to ask you something, he thought, catching the fox's attention. What is it? Well, I was wondering what it was like, you know, when you were sealed inside my mom. And as soon as the question was asked he could sense the slight anger that was emanated from his friend. Let's just say that I have grown a peculiar dislike to gold glowing chains made of chakra. And Naruto could tell that he shouldn't press on the facts. Well anyway, who do you think I will be paired up with? Well, since you are still technically the dead last, you would probably be paired off with that Uchiha brat and probably someone to act as a medium or someone with a high scholastic score but average combat skills to balance it out. So that probably will leave us with a civilian. And after he was done the confusion could be clearly seen on his face. Luckily no one was paying him any attention. Huh? Why do you say that? I mean, I understand the whole Sasuke thing, but to have a civilian? Why not one of the clan heirs? And with those questions showed the fox that there was still the small part of the mask that had stuck with the blonde. So I put it this way, kid, first you have the Nara, the Akamichi, and the Yamanaka. Since their fathers were, and still are, the first generation of the Ino Shikacho trio, they will probably pair them off since their families work best together. Second there are the Inyazuka, the Aburam, and the Hyuga. Their clans are some of the best known trackers in Hai no Kuni and even outside of its borders. So that will lead to them being paired up to make one hell of a tracking team that could find almost anyone or thing. And that leaves you, the Uchiha, and a civilian. Does that clear it up? And after receiving a mental picture of his host nodding, the connection was cut because at that moment Iruka had just walked in. Alright class, today is your last day being academy students and will now be going on to become genin, and in true Iruka fashion went into an in-depth speech of how proud he was to be their teacher and going over what he had taught. After that he pulled out a piece of paper and began to talk once more. Alright, I have with me the team placement forms right here, and so with it I will tell you which team you're on. Team 1, and he continued listing out the names of those who belonged on a certain team until he reached Team 7. Team 7 consists of Sasuke Uchiha, Naruto Uzumaki, and Naruto was now listening intently to Iruka so as to figure out who the other person would be on his team, Sakura Haruno. At that everyone, or rather the fangirls, groans at not being placed on the same team as Sasuke. Naruto on the other hand just blinked at the familiar sounding name until caught sight of her shouting about how true love prevails. Sakura, a girl that had long and near bright pink hair, wore a red dress that had a circle on the front. She had been one of the only civilian academy students to have scored at top of the class concerning academics. She was also probably one of the surprisingly few that worshipped Sasuke. The only thing he could do was sigh at how his luck had gotten so bad. The teams that followed proved that Kurama was right in how the clan heirs would be placed. After that Iruka had told them to wait for their team sensei to come and pick them up before he left. After that the senseis for teams 1 to 6 had come and picked them up before the door once more opened and two people walked in. The first one was a bearded man that was smoking a cigarette. His clothes were the usual green jonin flak jacket and standard blue shinobi pants with a similar colored long-sleeve shirt. The unique thing that caught Naruto's attention was the pair of trench knives strapped to his legs. The second person was the one that caught the most attention though. She was a head shorter than the man that came in with long curly raven black hair and eyes that closely resembled a ruby. Her choice of attire was a bit strange as one part was made of bandages that covered part of her upper right torso and her right arm. The rest of the outfit consisted of a red dress and fishnet that covered everything her clothing couldn't. "We're here to pick up our teams, which of you are teams 8 and 10? Asked a bearded shinobi. As an answer to his question the clan heirs, minus Sasuke, stood up. From that they split up with Ino, Shikamaru, and Choji, leaving with shinobi, while Hinata, Shino, and Kiba left with the Kunoichi. Now that they had left this now leaves Sasuke, Sakura, and Naruto alone to wait for their apparently tardy sensei. Sasuke eventually settled for just brooding while looking out the window. Sakura decided to try and get a date out of said brooder. Naruto on the other hand did something the other two didn't think he would do, then again, they probably still had the image of the blonde dope, however small it was. He got up and went to the wall and with them not knowing what to expect were jealous and shocked when he started to walk up the wall. He eventually got to the ceiling and got into a meditative stance and stayed that way the entire time. Reluctantly the other two went back to what they were doing before, one brooding even more than usual and the other with questions swimming in their mind. 3 uneventful hours later. After waiting for 3 hours only 2 of the 3 remaining graduates were annoyed and a little ticked off. It was at the sound of the door sliding open that drew their attention and the awareness of the third occupant. Who came in was a man that had silverfish gray hair that defied gravity and stuck out a little to his left. The only thing they could tell about the man's face was that he had his headband slanted so it covered his left eye and wore a face mask that covered the lower half of his face, leaving a plain black eye to be seen. Said man was currently reading an orange cover-backed book while also giggling a little to himself. The only person to recognize the type of giggling was the one that was currently meditating on the roof. Taking a moment to look up from his book he only saw 2 people when there should be 3. Curious he asked where their third teammate was only to receive both of them to point upwards. Now that didn't seem right, why would they be pointing up when he simply asked for where the third person was? And when he did look up he was surprised to see said third teammate meditating on the ceiling. Quickly getting over his slight shock he coughed a little and spoke, "Well now that I'm here let's meet up on the roof shall we?" And without another word disappeared with a burst of smoke. Sasuke and Sakura only blinked in surprise before both hurried out the door rushing to the staircase. Naruto simply dropped from the ceiling and landed on his feet, not unlike a graceful cat. Looking at the door he turned around and left via the window. On the roof. Naruto had made it to the roof a couple of minutes before his other 2 teammates, only to come with the sight of who he assumed to be his sensei reading and giggling. If one were to take a closer look you see the faintest of a perverted blush on the man's face. This only caused him to sigh at the fact his sensei was a pervert, causing said pervert to look at him and before going back to his book. A couple minutes later the remaining teammates came rushing through the roof access door. They both stumbled to a halt before the sight of both sensei and teammate. With a disappointed sigh their sensei closed his book to look at the genin hopefuls. Well, now that we're all here, let's get introductions out of the way first, shall we? And while the question, or rather statement, was simple to someone couldn't help but ask something. Sensei, would you mind showing us an example, say, like introducing yourself first? Came the curious and honest question from the only pinkette present. The man didn't seem to mind in the slightest though, as he gladly answered. Well, first off, my name is Kakashi Haddock, my likes are none of your concern, same can be said about my dislikes, my hobbies are something that you probably wouldn't understand, and my dreams for the future. I'll tell you when I come up with one. Now this only procured sweat drops from the other three present, with the common thought being he only told us his name. Alright, your turn, he said, pointing to Sasuke, who, by the way, only gave a HN in response before introducing himself. My name is Sasuke Chiha, I like very little, I dislike a lot of things, and I only have one hobby, and that is training. My dream, no, my ambition is to make sure a certain someone is dead. At the last part only Kakashi and Naruto had figured out who he wants dead. Alright, you, Pinky, you're next. Growling a little at the nickname she went on saying, my name is Sakura Haruno, my likes include, at this she looks at Sasuke and blushed, my dislikes include Ino pig and bullies. My hobbies are reading and learning. My dream for the future, at this she looks at Sasuke once more, she blushed heavily and squealed a little, causing sweat drops to form on Kakashi's and Naruto's head. Coughing a little to himself he went on and pointed to Naruto saying, alright, Blondie, you're next. If he expected a reaction for the nickname he would be disappointed as Naruto calmly introduced himself. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, my likes include training, running, strong people to fight, and learning new styles of taijutsu. At this Kakashi was briefly reminded of a certain green-clad shinobi, before shaking his head a little to rid himself of the image. My dislikes include people who can't tell the difference between a kunai and the scroll it's sealed in. Those who would hurt anyone just because they can, and those who lie to me, and when he said this Hiruzen could only wince and was glad no one could see him as he spied through his crystal ball. My hobbies include training in the taijutsu styles I learned, gardening, meditating, and cooking. My dreams for the future. Like Kakashi sensei, I'll tell you when I have one. At the end he caused the others on the roof to sweat drop. Cough anyway, now that we got introductions out of the way, let's meet tomorrow at training ground 7 at 6. Oh. And I suggest you don't eat anything, you'll just throw it up anyway. And with that he vanished in that same puff of smoke, leaving the three genin hopefuls alone. Hey Sasuke-kun, would you like to go out? Came the quick question from, guess who, Sakura. No. Was the simple reply she got before he walked away, causing her to deflate a little. Now while he normally wouldn't care for something like this, he felt that she could use something to lift her spirits and some advice. You know, he says, catching her attention, your chances of getting a date with Sasuke would increase if you were to train instead of fawning over him. And before she could angrily retort he was gone in a blur of movement, greatly surprising her and the thought to have vanished sensei. Sakura, after cooling down, then decided to think over what the blonde had said before walking off as well. The next morning. Naruto had woken up early once more to get ready. After re-evaluating Kakashi's suggestion he decided against it, as without a full stomach, one couldn't operate at full capacity and more easily irritated. So after taking a shower he got himself a healthy breakfast and left heading towards the training grounds, while also making sure he had at least 3 snacks with him, 1 for himself and 2 for his teammates. Training ground 7. When he arrived at the training grounds he was met with the sound of silence and the sight of no one. While having nothing better to do he walked up a tree and sat down on a strong enough branch that could support his weight and those of the weights he had on. It was only a couple of moments later that he heard the approach of 2 people. Looking down he saw that it was Sasuke and Sakura. After another moment he heard Sakura complain on where he was. His answer? Jumped down from the branch he was resting on, which was high enough for him to cause a small dust cloud to cover himself. Sakura's head reaction was as expected as she jumped a total of 3 feet in the air out of shock and fright. When she saw that it was Naruto who caused it, she gave a low growl that emitted from her throat. Not even looking fazed by the low amount of kai she was releasing, he tossed both her and Sasuke 2 of the snacks he packed. They were about to ask why he did that until their stomachs gave off a large growl for food sustenance. At that they devoured the snacks in their hands. After that was done Naruto vanished once more into the tree they were resting at and waited for their sensei. 3 uneventful hours later, again. It was at this point when Kakashi had made it to the training grounds, only to see once more 2 out of 3 of his charges. Excuse me, but where is your third teammate? At that he saw that Sakura turned around to answer, but when she saw that it was him she gave an eardrum shattering, "You're late." Now that gave Kakashi one hell of a headache at the volume she had shouted at him. Regardless, it was Sasuke who answered him and, like yesterday, pointed up. And once more he saw that Naruto was meditating on a branch that seemed to be 20 feet of the ground. "Well, if you don't mind coming down, Naruto, we'll begin what we came here for." Now that caught all of their attention, albeit Naruto expected this. What? Did you think he just studied taijutsu styles this whole time? Well, shame on you. He knew that this was a test to see if they were really ready to become genin. And if they failed, well, he would just leave the village. After all, the ninja can't stop a civilian from leaving the village if they so wished. When he pulled out 2 bells, Naruto instantly knew what kind of test to expect since he had learned that the Sannin were the first to ever take this kind of test and was put down as a part of their history. He was lucky that he found that fact out, otherwise he would be stumped on what to expect. "From now until noon you are to attempt to take these bells from my possession. For those who don't get a bell will be re-entered into the academy for another year," he said, not even a second after pulling the bells out and still in his usual drawl. "But sensei, there are only 2 bells," stated Sakura. "Ah, well, it seems that either way one of you will fail regardless then." And when he expected it, simultaneous shouts of "Nani" were heard. "Wait a moment, I'm missing a fearful shout. But that can't be right." And then he took notice the lack of shouting was, once more, from the unaffected blonde. "Geez, does nothing faze this kid? Oh well, we'll see soon enough." "Alright, now you have until I say start," he began once more while setting an alarm clock on one of the wooden posts present till noon to try and get these bells off me. "Like I said, the one who doesn't get one fails. Understand?" he said, to which he got 2 confident nods and a hesitant yes. "Guess who? Well, I guess we should start. But before we start I should tell you to come at me with the intent to kill, otherwise you won't stand a chance. So Hajime." And at the same time all 3 graduates vanished, the alarm clock started, and Kakashi brought the small orange book out and started giggling perversely. "But Sasuke in the trees. What is he doing? To just stand there is just giving us an easy target. So what is his game?" are the thoughts of the young Uchiha. Well, he may be a bit boastful in his skills, even he knew that he couldn't take on a seasoned genin without training more himself, let alone a jonin. It was when he heard the ruffling of leaves behind him that he turned around quickly, only to come face to face with someone he didn't plan on seeing soon. But after a moment he grew a small smirk and nodded his head in agreement. "But Sakura in the hedges. I hope he doesn't find me, otherwise I won't stand a chance," were the hopeful thoughts of the only civilian academy graduate present. She realized that with her current skills, she wouldn't be able to do much except attack from a distance, since her taijutsu was only average at best, and the only ninjutsu she knew was the basic 3. "DSST. Sakura. Over here." And when she did turn she grew confused, and after a moment her eyes grew wide while mentally berating herself for how stupid she was. Another moment later she gained a small grin and nodded her head in the affirmative. When she turned back around she caught the glimpse of blonde hair and blue eyes. But Kakashi, middle of the training grounds. Sasuke is hiding up in the trees and has suppressed his chakra to civilian levels, impressive but not impossible. Kakashi thought while giving a glance to said trees. Sakura is hiding down in the hedges, and since her reserves are only slightly larger than average, she didn't have to try to suppress her chakra levels much. And again he glanced but more to the hedges instead. Now where is Naruto? So far he is the only one I can't find. And I'll admit, it's a bit annoying. And it was these thoughts that were on his mind the most, as he had thought it would have been easier to detect Naruto with his large chakra reserves. That is, until he heard someone speaking from behind him. "You know, I think it's a bit rude to read something like that out in public. Especially in front of kids." And immediately he spun around with a surprised look. That though only lasted for a brief moment before his usual carefree attitude came back. "And you shouldn't sneak up on a skilled ninja, I could kill ya." What he got in response was not what he expected though. Instead of just talking and giving a response to his statement, he just launched himself at Kakashi. And not graduate level launching, but more like guy level launching. And we both know that with his weights off, guy's speed requires the shuriken to keep up a visual with him. Regretfully he didn't have enough time to even lift his headband before the blonde was on him and threw a straight jab to his solar plexus. This, however, he did manage to see and twisted his body to the side and dodged. What he missed though was the kick that followed. It drove into his side, once more like Guy, and the current thought in his head was, did Guy teach him or something? He hits just like him. At that point he was lucky he ducked his head to dodge a back fist that would have knocked him off his feet. A moment later he ducked his head to avoid another kick, this time aimed at his head. Instincts working overtime, he wasn't just dodging left and right, but up, down, forward, back, and diagonally too. And when he was going to land a hit, the blonde simply dodged with room to spare and countered with an aggressive thrusting palm strike to his face. With each strike blocked, Kakashi could feel his bones creaking under the strain from the force of the blow. Every time he dodged, he could feel the rush of wind that followed the appendage. And as he thought was about to get a strike in, the Jinchuriki would dodge with the smallest of spaces from his fist or foot. Eventually the blonde managed to get another strike on the silver-haired jonin, this one in the form of a swift uppercut. At that moment he could have sworn he heard his jaw fracture from the excessive force before he saw stars swimming within his vision. He knew that if he didn't use his soul Sharingan eye, then he would lose this fight fast. But just when he was about to lift his headband from his covered eye, he was struck from behind in a comical way, involving his opponent's foot meeting his ass in an agonizing rising kick that launched him into an open field with trees on both sides of him. Quickly looking around for the extremely dangerous graduate, he breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that the blonde hadn't followed him. That only lasted for barely even a second as he was bombarded from both sides by kunai and shuriken alike. Once more he let his instincts take over, as with his rattled mind he didn't think to use kawarimi. Seconds later the storm of deadly projectiles stopped, further confusing the dumbfounded jonin. Why would they stop? They actually had me on the ropes there, so why? And his answers were answered when he felt a rise in temperature come in form behind him. Turning around he caught sight of a larger than average fireball heading right towards him. What the hell? First Naruto and his ridiculous strength, speed, and skill, the seemingly endless kunai and shuriken, and now this. What kind of genin are they? Oh yes, he's labeling genin because he already knows that he was going to pass them. But until the bell sounded he had to keep his senses on full alert, more specifically on Naruto. Mini flashback no jutsu. Okay, so when you get him there, and after me and Sakura are done throwing the kunai and shuriken, I use the gakakyu, thus making him use the kawarimi? Asked an anxious Sasuke. Yes, and after that let Sakura take her turn, then you can take her spot and wear him down the rest of the way and snatch the bells after that. If he still has the bells after you got to him, then let me take it from there, okay? And while the plan involved the assistance of others, Sasuke couldn't argue with it. Even if he didn't get to do as much as Naruto, he still got his chance to prove himself. Alright. And with that Naruto nodded before he disappeared without a trace. Mini flashback no jutsu kai. Right before the fireball hit, Kakashi used the kawarimi just as Naruto predicted. After witnessing the fireball explode, he was glad he landed a farther distance from the impact, as the explosion seemed to expand before it stopped altogether. Thunk. The sound of a kunai landing beside his head in the tree made him turn abruptly to face who was coming after him next. He sighed a little on the inside when he saw that it was Sakura, but when she started to throw kunai after kunai at him, he managed to dodge them, but when he sped to Sakura's position and lightly struck her before she vanished out of his sight. There is no way that was a bunshin. I know the difference between an illusion and the real thing, and that was the real thing. So what did she do? There was no way she could have used shunshin, that's too advanced for her. So what? Mini flashback no jutsu. Alright Sakura, what I want you to do is when Kakashi gets in the forest is to attack him by mostly using kunai and the basic 3. Do you understand why? He asked, hoping that her intelligence wasn't exaggerated. I think so, yeah. You want me to use the kawarimi with the kunai to try and confuse him, and while he is distracted, I am to try and cut the bells loose with kunai from afar once more. If that doesn't work, let him catch up to me and use kawarimi with a nearby kunai and henge immediately while making a bunshin, right? She said, earning an approving nod from the blonde. Yeah, that's right, but try overuse your chakra, you don't necessarily have the most out of us 3. And while he said it in a kind tone, Sakura couldn't help but feel a little down at that fact. But at that she looked up in confusion. That also means you probably have the best control out of us all as well, so you should be able to use the bare minimum to do them and remove the smoke that signifies the use of kawarimi. And when he said this, Sakura gained that extra bit of confidence that this will work before she set off to accomplish her task. After watching her leave, Naruto vanished once more without a trace. Mini flashback no jutsu kai. It only took Kakashi a couple of seconds to spot Sakura again, but was kept at quite the distance because of the seemingly endless kunai she was throwing. Getting tired of dodging kunai after kunai, he brought out a pair of his own and stared to deflect the incoming pieces of lethal metal. When he got within range he struck, only the same thing as before happened. This went on for a good hour while making him more confused as it progressed. It was when she somehow drew him out into the open without his noticing that she stopped before she vanished once more. A second later his face almost came into close contact with the foot of one Sasuke, almost being that he managed to duck at the last moment before he was once more engaged in a bout of taijutsu. At least this one was less intense than the one with the blonde. Sasuke led the assault by throwing fast jabs at the man's torso, a few kick here and there, before finally Kakashi caught his left arm. Sasuke followed through with a kick that came down on the Jonin's head, only to be caught once by the other hand. Luckily Sasuke still had his other hand ready for use as he snapped it forward, not at the body of the Jonin in particular, but rather the bells. Seeing this happen, Kakashi threw Sasuke away with some effort, as despite his outward appearance he was almost out of steam. Sasuke on the other hand could see the perspiration drip of the man's brow and smirked just knowing, that if he kept the pace he was at the Jonin would collapse. And like a bat out of hell he sped his way to the tiring Jonin. Kakashi couldn't keep up with the next assault, as when Sasuke was on him, he landed a solid strike to his solar plexus, knocking whatever wind he had left out. When he landed a couple of feet away he was wheezing and coughing like an old man who just gone up a flight of stairs. And when Sasuke threw a kunai at him, he managed to dodge to the best of his abilities. Luckily for him he wasn't the target as Sasuke aimed for the bells once more and successfully cut the string that tied them to the Jonin's belt loop. Not even wasting a second he dashed forward, grabbed the bells, and took off leaving a worn-out Jonin. 1 hour later Memorial Stone. Kakashi could only stare at the 3 genin in front of him with only annoyance. Not at the fact they're here, but rather that they had outdone him. Him. The Jonin. The one who had more field experience than most any other Jonin out there. But here he is, just standing while looking at the greenhorn genin. That beat him. "Sigh, okay, I'll be blunt, you pass." And while he could have said it with a bit more enthusiastic tone, the genin couldn't help but cheer. Well, more Sakura than Naruto, and definitely more than Sasuke, but you could see the small smirk of satisfaction on his face. Okay, calm down," and when he saw them calm down he went on, "I'll be the first to admit that when I first saw you, I never would have expected this. But then again, what Jonin expects academy graduates to beat them, huh?" And when he met only blank stares in return he hurriedly went on. "What I am trying to say is that what you did here today is something to be proud of, but let me give some advice that will help you along your way to becoming excellent shinobi. When I had to take this exact same test when I graduated I would have failed had it not been for my teammate that convinced our sensei to pass us, and what he said afterwards is something that I will follow the rest of my life. Those who break the rules are scum, but those who abandon their friends or comrades are lower than trash." Those are the words that my sensei said to me and my teammates the day we became genin and, as I said, still follow it to this day. So with that in mind I hope that you will too," he said, and at the mention of his teammates, he gave a nearly undetectable glance at the memorial stone. The reason for it being nearly undetectable was that Naruto was able to catch the subtle glance. After he let the information sink in he went on saying, "Alright, meet here tomorrow at 6 and we will start your first day as shinobi of the leaf." And with that Kakashi disappeared in a plume of smoke. Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura only looked at where he was for a moment before they went their own way, with Sakura too tired from today to even attempt to ask Sasuke out on a date. What if Naruto Master 8 in and bijuu mode in chunin exams? And thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part, comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.